Well, good morning, everybody. Just wanted to say thanks for giving me the kind of time yesterday off of doing forecast videos. I spent the weekend with my family in Chicago. Kids just started spring break, so I thought I'd just get a small getaway for them. But it was interesting. While I was in Chicago, we walked out on Navy Pier yesterday on Monday. It was quite windy, but very mild. And a lot of people were discussing some of the news stories that were out in Chicago over the weekend, which was about how warm the winter was. So I want to show you a neat tool that I hope you go and play around with. I'm going to link this below so you have access to it. It's NOAA's tool called Climate at a Glance. It's one of my favorites. You've actually seen me use it many times. And when you get to this website, you can choose your region of analysis across the top. And you can look at mapping or time series or rankings or whatever you want. And I want you to click, well, here's what I did. I clicked on city and I went to city time series. I went to average temperature. I chose 3 month, which means we're going to look at the 3 months ending on February. And I went back to as far back as we have data. You can go back to 1895 and with most locations in this data set. And I chose Chicago just to kind of get an example. Now you can choose trends. You can choose a different base period. It doesn't matter. But when you do this, you just click plot. And then what will happen at the bottom is it'll put the data together for you in this nice little bit of JavaScript. And yeah, so here it is. That was the average winter temperature in Chicago this year, 35 degrees Fahrenheit. Now, the average over the whole time period, which they have data starting in 1959 for this particular data set, is 25.9. So yeah, it was very, very mild winter. Now, we have other stations across the state that have longer records. Like, for example, if I go down to Springfield, that's actually my hometown, just in case anybody's curious. And we have data here going back to 1902 with only some missing data right in here. Looks like in 1929. But again, something to point out, like 1932 was the warmest on the data set, but we can see second place over here with 2024. And what's fun about this site is you can go down to the bottom here and you can actually click on each of these categories and it'll reorganize the data for you. So now I put it ranked warmest to coolest. So there's 31, 32, 23, 24, or you can flip it around. So we have had some pretty amazing winters. In fact, I wasn't born for this one, but this was a huge, actually both of these winters were huge snowy winters for the central U.S. and my home state of Illinois and hometown of Springfield. Actually, I lived just right outside of it in a little town called Rochester. All right, enough about me. This is just a fantastic tool for anyone to use. And what's great about it is you can go back and look at any analog year you may have in mind and find the data for it and play around with it. So I wanted to show you that just as we get started. Now, as I was driving home yesterday, I was thinking a lot about last week's forecast, right? We looked at all of the new model runs, and I don't have any new long-range model runs to show you. So today it's going to be an analog long-range forecast. But I was thinking a lot about the performance I mentioned last Wednesday, right? So we talked a lot about how well the models did last spring, and they did pretty terrible. So we need to do this, though. Sometimes models gain some momentum in their ability to kind of hang on and understand a pattern. So we want to ask now, how well did they do with the winter forecast? All right. So the first map we're looking at is something I've shown you before, but it is December, January, and February, those 3 months, looking at average temperature ranks by climate district. And we just kind of eyeball this. We were a little cooler west at times, but quite warm across the northern tier of the United States. And we had some cooler time periods in the south, but the reality of the whole pattern was we only had one, what I would call longer duration colder outbreak. And that was January 9th through about the 22nd, 23rd. That was when all that Arctic air came through. But outside of that, just incredibly mild conditions for these climate districts. Okay, what about the precipitation side of it? Now, remember, this is something we talked about, what was it, last Monday? That whole, what have you done for me lately kind of thing with the atmosphere. So a lot of the heavy precip, especially up here in Minnesota as an example, so much of this was like before Christmas. January, February, we had major snow deficits across the northern tier of the United States. But when you look at it on the whole, this is what the precipitation ranks look like. So here we go. Let's see how the European model did, the National Multi-Model Ensemble, and then our own government and the CPC. So the European model, how well did it predict the temperatures? Well, it went warmer northern tier, warmer northwest, and near average here. And when you look at it, I'm looking at this always in terms of patterns. I can't make an argument that it did a terrible job, except maybe it was a bit too warm, I don't know, maybe in the northwest. But you can see we spent so much of winter with very mild conditions at times in the Northwest, which means the temperature volatility in the Northwest isn't captured by either of these two models. So I can't give it a bad grade. On the precipitation side of it, let's look at the seasonal precipitation. It was calling for wetter throughout the plains, a little drier in the Mid-South and drier than average in the Northwest, but wetter in California, wetter across the South and up the East Coast. So how did it do? Well, okay, there were some pockets in here that are a little bit drier, but we were much drier in the, kind of the UP, the Great Lakes states here, and then back into Montana, North Dakota, Wyoming. A bit drier in this area. Remember, we talked quite a bit about that. And one area that was really missed was this little corner of North Carolina, which lately has seen some better precipitation. But, okay, can I make an argument that it was complete opposite of what it should have been? Well, maybe not the only place I could say that would be the Pacific Northwest. But you go talk to some folks in the Pacific Northwest. They have a phenomenon up there they call a rainy drought. And what happens is you end up getting moisture throughout winter. Your statistics look like this, but it's not the kind of massive correction on the drought that you expect to see. And we have big snowfall deficits here. We talked about that, right, in the Rockies. And this is an area that went into some drought. So maybe this 3-month statistic doesn't capture what happened at the end of this time period. So again, I cannot give it a really terrible grade. Same vein, let's do the National Multi-Model Ensemble. It was only cooler or near average in this section of the country, most of the east. It was quite warm everywhere else. Okay, so the model at least was directionally correct. What about the precipitation side of the things from the National Multi-Model Ensemble? It is important to note that it had a little bit of a drier signal here near the Great Lakes, and it was also drier than average in the Northwest. I have to say that the National Multi-Model Ensembles kind of grabbed my attention with maybe its ability to pick up on what this spring could be. Now, you remember, go back and watch it last Friday and last Thursday and last Wednesday. I talked about it 3 days in a row, that the National Multi-Model Ensemble is the model that's trying to bring the driest conditions earliest in the year, earliest in the spring here, and spread them throughout summer across this whole area, right? That's what that model's doing. So we're going to have to watch this one carefully. How well did NOAA do? And this will be the end of it. This was NOAA's forecast. And, overall, again, we can't look at the models and say that they were really, for the whole country, directionally poor in their forecasting. So this is just to add some context to what I shared with you last week. And when the new data from the CPC come in, which usually is about mid-month, we'll do a full review of all the models and make sure that we know what to expect from them going forward. But I needed you to see this so you knew what I was, trusting as we go forward. A little bit better trust than I had a year ago. Okay, all of that, let's get back to the near term here. Last 7 days of total accumulated precip. Overall, that system that came through late last week and hit this whole section of the eastern Corn Belt, hit parts of the south, severe weather to the south, all the flooding rains here, and then the wet weather up the east coast. This was huge. What I mean by that is this went a long way to revive a lot of moisture. Now, the west got a smaller break, and we're still concerned about what's going on in the western and high plains, the northern plains of the U.S., and into the Canadian prairie, where we still have some snow on the ground here. But we have to ask what does this upcoming setup look like as we get into this, the critical time period of spring, which is the major moisture delivery mechanism for a lot of the United States east of the Rockies? Because when you look over the last 30 days, you can now start to see where those bigger holes are. Now, we've got a lot of good news for parts of Arizona in terms of moisture. But this hole right in through here, Kansas, parts of the panhandles, that's an area that despite this cutoff load that's going to get kind of just dropped into this area, I don't see how we're going to be able to really revive enough to offset the last 30 days of deficits in parts of Kansas. Now, we've had some good moisture come through at times, but mainly hitting eastern Kansas. You kind of stretch up through the rest of the upper Midwest here, and you can see other regions that have shown up quite dry. And just thinking about this dryness in this area, yesterday it was interesting to watch on satellite. Let me take you back to it. We actually had some, you can see some of the fire. Some of this is prescribed burn here, and you can just see the wildfire smoke in parts of Arkansas and up into Missouri. I'm actually heading over to Columbia later today. Looking forward to that trip. And then in Kentucky and Illinois as well. But on the whole, as the sun is rising on the East Coast today, this will be what I'm watching. Our next system coming into the west and how it evolves. That's going to be critical because the jet stream pattern today looks like this. Got it? This is what it's going to look like by late week. Let's let those both reset. So here's today. Here's later this week. And we have to assess what this omega look to the pattern is going to do. How much snow this is going to be bringing to the front range, and what does the severe risk look like out ahead of this? Because there's actually a multi-day severe risk set up with this particular pattern evolution. And then I want to know how long does it take for this to break down, and what does the new temperature pattern do? There's some good information coming up ahead for you on that temperature pattern. Okay, this morning at 6 a.m. when I was recording, this is the all hazards weather map. A lot of winter weather advisories throughout the western mountain ranges, but right in through here. This is actually winter storm watch, and this is probably going to be converted over to winter storm warning as the week progresses. This right now is fire weather watch here, and we got pretty chilly down here, and that's why there's a frost advisory for parts of Alabama and Georgia. So let's kind of get in and see where this is all going. I think assessing the upper level pattern is going to be critical first. So what we're going to do is we're going to be watching vorticity. So this is spin in the mid-levels of the atmosphere. And just what we have to remember is these are the troughs. This is a short wave trough, and you get a vorticity maximum in it. And what we look for is that on the downwind side right here, we tend to get rising motion. Now I'm just picking this one out of Kansas and Missouri because I'm heading over here today, and there is the risk that this little shortwave could initiate some storms and all the heat and moisture that's ahead of this. But watch what happens on the backside. Broad trough, the rest of the day sweeps into the west, and here comes the omega pattern. Look at this thing. Now can you see it? And look at all that spin that comes into Southern California and Arizona. And where did I tell you the best rising motion is? Here. But there's a little ribbon of vorticity that extends from parts of New Mexico toward Lake Michigan. What we're going to see is on Friday, getting into Saturday, how the evolution of that cutoff low to finish off this week, Wednesday, Thursday, Friday, opens up the central United States to the risk of some stronger storms while keeping heavy snow in the front range of the Colorado Rockies and heavy rain down here in parts of Arizona. I mean, this is going to be a fascinating setup to watch. And it just stays there all the way through Saturday. And what happens is instead of this kind of jumping out of the mountains, there's a trough out ahead of it that ends up allowing for a high over low to get stacked north-south over the western United States. And this is going to be bringing in some much colder air toward this late weekend time period and into early next week. And all the way by next Wednesday, that upper level low is still kind of sitting and spinning in this area. So we got to watch where this thing is going to go and what it's going to do and how much precipitation it's going to create. Because this is what I've got over the next 7 days from the WPC. And this hole remains. Now, you know, last week I had hoped that that trough would move out of New Mexico and Arizona and over toward the panhandles and be slow in doing so. And that would be the thing that could return some moisture into this area. But as it stands, it sits here. And all that cold air that's in it is going to be making for a huge snow event, upslope snow event in Colorado, where the ribbon of vorticity sits here. And we're going to watch for those strong to severe storms out ahead of it and to the south, very, very heavy rain. So that's what that pattern is going to be providing. So let's kind of get in and see what it's doing. Let's go to the models next. Okay, today, storm risk marginal in Missouri. You saw the shortwave that's going to do that, right? As we get into tomorrow, this is now when this second wave is here. We start to keep an eye right in this region of Kansas, Missouri, and Nebraska, right in through here. And then on the next day, this would be the 14th, this really begins to open up into a broader area of the chance of some strong to severe storms. Now, in addition to that, we've got some snow to talk about. This comes from the WPC, and we're going to mainly focus right here on the front range of the Rocky Mountains. So if we kind of zoom in, this is one of those extremely challenging forecasts, which is all driven by elevation. And if you're from Colorado, you know exactly what I'm talking about. The WPC chance of getting at least 4 inches is shown here. And if we step this up to 8, this will be the trickiest spot, right in through here, in my opinion. We step it up to 12. This is all probabilities, by the way. This is the chance. So right now, the model's got, I guess that's an 80% chance of a foot of snow Just incredible to see that. There's your 8-inch chance and your 4-inch chance, and finally your 2-inch chance. Now we're going to take a closer look with one of the models in a second, but we need to kind of get in and see what this is looking like in the high-res NAM. So here we go. Playing throughout the day today on Tuesday. This evening, that's where that little shortwave begins to work its magic, putting out that little possibility of getting some storms in this area late this afternoon into tonight. While that's going on, the northwest, look at the northwest taking that front coming through. Comes right over parts of Nevada, goes over Idaho, gets into Utah and Colorado tonight. And as we get into early tomorrow morning, this is when our pattern begins to evolve. Okay, this is 9 a.m. Wednesday. Now, if we play this forward, you can see the low spinning, King, right here. That's as it's making its way down toward Arizona as the Omega pattern sets up. Out ahead of it, on that band of vorticity, which sits right here on this front, we will watch for this area for the risk of strong to severe storms. The moisture avoids this area, but kind of comes into South Dakota, Nebraska. Wyoming is going to be snow, and watch the front range right here starting tomorrow night. Upslope flow, this little corridor and through here, possibly the heaviest snow. Now what happens out ahead of it is the complex of storms tomorrow night moves into Iowa, maybe into Wisconsin, and stretches out on that frontal boundary where you saw the vorticity ribbon. And that gets you only out there, though, to middle of the day on Thursday. Once we get into Thursday night, it's going to be this whole corridor. We'll keep an eye on opening up for some strong to severe storms. But take a look at the snow here. Some pretty impressive snowfall totals. Now, where does the pattern go after that? Now, this is the trick. Upper level height pattern. As we slide this forward, there it is. So did you see? Sorry, let me point out what I'm going to watch. Watch this trough right here. It's just going to slide like this. Very unique. It doesn't go east. It goes south. And when it makes its biggest snows for Colorado, it's right here. This would be Wednesday into Thursday. And then it sets up over the Mojave Desert. I mean, that's where it is. So frontal boundaries locked in out ahead of it. And as we play forward, here comes the much colder air of the Great Lakes by Saturday night into Sunday. And then as we get into early next week, a lot of colder air trapped into this much warmer air in the west as this low becomes kind of stacked north-south underneath this large high. And if we play forward, this is what I want to know. Out there on the 21st, 22nd, and 23rd, the models have adjusted where that colder air is going to be. It's now somewhere in this vicinity versus being trapped down here. And every time we get a lot of cold air in spring here, if we get any sort of a rebound in warmth to the south, that sets this whole area up in the middle for a whole lot more active and severe weather. What made this all possible was that the western U.S. ridge became an Alaskan ridge. And if this keeps retrograding farther to the west, which is what I think some of the models want to do, like put it way up here into this part of Russia, that could open up a time period here that could get a bit more stormy. Now, the models aren't seeing that yet. I'm just kind of using the analysis here with this trough. So let's go see what it does. Let's compare the GFS on the left to the European on the right. Let's get this sliding forward. So here we go. This is getting into Wednesday night. We talked about that. This is now Thursday morning, afternoon, and evening. Now remember, on Thursday evening, this is the area we're going to be watching for the risk of those stronger storms. As we then play this through Thursday evening, heavy rains move toward the southeast. Moisture moves through New England. The low is still sitting and spinning here over the Four Corner states. Playing into the weekend, the deeper trough comes in off of the Hudson Bay toward the Great Lakes on Sunday. Possibly spread some light snow throughout the Great Lakes. I wouldn't even be surprised if we got some snow into Illinois, Indiana, and parts of Ohio, even into New England. And then what will be interesting to watch after that is right here, the 20th, 21st, and 22nd. Now, can you already start to see that this is when the coldest air is locked under that high pressure? But we have some sort of troughing here. There's lower pressure in this area. And if we get mild air here, the collision zone's in the middle. And I just think this is the 21st. That'll be the equinox, right? I think going into that full third week of the month is going to be active in this area. And I'm going to make a case for that. Okay, total precip right now from the models. We're only going to take these out a week because we just can't trust them beyond that, to be honest. So here we go. That's out one full week in the European. This is the GFS. That hole right there concerns me. European GFS. This is the 10-day out from the European ensemble. And just take note of the wetter conditions we see in this whole area in the model. There's the big snows. There's the low getting trapped over Arizona. That's your look from the European ensemble. European AI. That's not ensemble, that's AI. And then we have the snow side of this. Take a look. 1 full week. Now watch. We talked about this, but watch the snow coming in this weekend into early next week with that colder air that comes diving through the Great Lakes. Okay, here's a week out in the GFS. Same thing. Now, I did want to take a close look right here because this is what we've got from the current European model. Now, remember, this is a 10-to-1. 10-to-1. But it's got a couple of places here looking at a foot plus of snow. Can we exactly pin down how much? Not even close. Is this going to be an absolutely maddening forecast right here? Yeah, it is. You're going to have to just know that we have the potential, and we're going to watch it as we go forward. But it's there in the ensembles as well. Here's the chance over the next 10 days of 1 inch. Here's the chance of 3 inches. I just got the new run in. Let's go back and grab that for you. Here's the chance of 3 inches of snow. 6, 12. See that little spot? 18. And it's going up to 2 feet. Why not? So big event coming into this area. Now, on the drier side of it, we can see this region. This is the area that I continue to be concerned about. And now we've watched with the new forecast evolution, this area in Kansas and Oklahoma, that's gone over drier too. We also have to keep an eye right here in parts of Virginia and North Carolina as they have the risk of running drier with this pattern as well. Okay, what about week 2? The new model runs came out like this today, and I'm not sold on it. I'm really not sold on this being an inactive time period here, and I'm going to make a case for why. I think it has something to do with the temperatures, but the time period I'm talking about would be like the 20th to the 26th. All right? So let me make my case here. It's going to be a story with the temperature pattern. Here's today's highs getting into tomorrow. I mean, this is still very, very mild. Bit of a misstep for me. I said I thought we were done with the 30 degrees warmer days. We weren't. Tuesday into Wednesday, we're still up in that range here in parts of the Midwest, upper Midwest. There's Thursday's highs. Now remember, this will be the corridor that we have to watch for the strong to severe storms while the snow is back here. And then we go into Friday. Now watch the weekend colder air come across the Great Lakes. That's Saturday. There's Sunday, Monday. Much colder air coming in behind this thing as the west warms up. Now that warmer west, last day 5 through 10. But the thing that I'm struggling with is this. You see, when you get out there day 10 through 15 now, we have a boundary somewhere sitting in here, and that is oriented southwest to northeast. And I cannot rule out that this is going to help deepen troughs coming off of the Rocky Mountains. And if it does, then we're just going to shoot storm systems through here, which open the Gulf up. And that's what makes me think once you get out there past day 10, well, I know that's halfway through week 2, but once you get out there, this is really going to go over quite a bit more active in the central part of the United States. It's also there in the European as well. See that colder air tucked into this area? It is very rare that you get cold air here and can't get something active going south of it. So I'm going to have to watch that really, really carefully. Because if the jet stream winds go from this right now, that's by the end of this week. That's when the colder air comes into the New England area. The upper level ridge still sits here. A lot of warmth in the west. If this pattern evolves to look like that by the 23rd, 24th, and 25th, I mean, I like that look. Whew. I just want you to keep an eye on it with me. All right, let's get on with this. ECMWF's forecast of the MJO, still quite similar to what we saw last week. But the ensemble is trying to take this around and bring it into phase 8 temporarily and then drop it into this area back into null space. So rather than keeping it moving around, that's what it's doing. Now, to be honest with you, the model that fits my narrative is the CFSV2. You got to be really careful. Let me rephrase that. I need to be really careful in choosing models that just fit my narrative. But I'm going to make a case for this, and I'm more than prepared to be wrong. Here's that that third week of March into the fourth week. And what you start to see here is, see how this starts to get a bit more active in here? The colder air, a little bit drier here, but this is the area of activity. That's the 26th through April 1st. That's that end of March potential. I just think it's there. I think it's there in the pattern to get going. And take a look at what the CFSV2 does. It's got an end to that colder air pretty quickly and brings back in more mild conditions. Now, that is not the way that the European model says it. The European model, if we look at the precipitation side first, tries to take that that third week of March and doesn't have a whole lot going on in it for the West Coast, for this area. It then tries to excite things a bit for the final bit, right up to Easter here. Can you see the wetter conditions through the country? And it wants to kind of keep that into early April. But it doesn't relinquish hold of the colder conditions. Like, for example, that's the 7-day forecast that ends on the 9th of April. It wants to tuck this cooler air in and kind of leave it hanging around. And last week I would have said, yep, that's what's going to happen. Cooler finish to March, cool start to April, and then it opens up. I think it opens up earlier. That's all I'm saying. And that's just purely based on the cold air that's coming in day 10 through 15 right now in the forecast here, that then moves out once we get later in the month. So if you are listening to me going, what is he saying? Yeah, that's it. I'm not 100% sold on this pattern, and we got to watch it evolve over the next couple of days. All right, let's wrap it up. Bigger picture things. This is the last 7 days of ocean temperature change. So there's that colder water that's emerged there. Not a lot of change in the North Pacific. All right. This has gotten a little cooler as well. This is over in the Indian Ocean dipole area. Now, current ocean temperatures look like this. And our El Nino is still present in terms of the ocean temperatures. But we have questions about the speed at which it's going to fade. It is fading, right? We talked a lot about that. And my only new long-range forecast update is going to be this. I just used every year when that happened. So all of these years are in April that had an El Nino in the preceding winter, and they go into neutral or La Nina in the following summer. And on the left, you have the temperature pattern. So do you notice how we're more mild in this area? Just a little cooler than average across the south, really the southern plains. Now, when you see cooler than average being forecast here, it's not cold. It's just we stitch them all together, we're a bit cooler. What did the precip do? A bit drier in the upper Midwest, not by much, but a bit drier, meaning probably better early planting windows, especially if it comes in mild. We tended to stay wet south. But you know that as we go into summer, my biggest concern area right now is either here or here on the risk of being driest compared to average. And we're going to watch that evolve in the new model runs, which will come out hopefully by the end of this week, if not early next week. All right, last thing we got to cover here is South America. In the last month, now this only goes up to March 5th, so this is February 6th through March 5th, there has been this pocket of dryness that's shown up in some of our data sets. We do know that over the next 10 days, take a look, this is day 5 through 10, day 10 through 15, temperatures are really beginning to crank again. Some places are going to be, 5 to 10 degrees Celsius above normal. What's concerning me, though, is that the new forecast for precipitation anomalies even went drier than what I showed you last week in this area. The wettest conditions are along the Paraná River. This is Rio Grande do Sul, parts of Argentina and Uruguay. Now, when we look at the new long-range Euro, from now to April 10th, it has trended back over drier in this area, suggesting that we could be seeing some stress coming into the safrinha crop of corn and cotton. Very wet down here, though. And that's going to be a top story to continue to follow. We picked it up last Friday. Here it is again today. Let's watch this continue to evolve as we go through the month of March. Okay, covered a lot today, but I took the day off yesterday, so I had a lot I wanted to tell you. We'll pick back up again on Wednesday morning. Thanks.